Hi folks, and Camila Foggia. Our friends at Kiri's Motorrad, which is basically our local BMW dealer here in Cork, where both of these girls came from actually, decided to host a demo day where you can actually go out, book whatever bike you wanted from the BMW lineup and take it for a group ride, right? And see how it feels. So I decided to actually go out and take for a spin a bit of a dream bike for me, which is the kind of new release R12 GS, which I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. So I decided to go out, take it for a spin and see how the bike actually feels. So here are my first impressions. Let's have a look. So between the RT, the XR, or even the RR, right, why choose the R12 GS? And for me, it's obvious, right? The bike looks absolutely gorgeous, clearly in a match to the original R80 GS, right, which is the great-great-grandmother of my own GS, right? And also, that bike has a few things that actually hit very close to home, and I'll explain what it is. First of all, let's run through some of the specs about the R12 GS. To get things started, we got the engine, right? Which is the same design that used to come on the 1200 GSs all the way up to, I think, 2013, right? So it's basically the air and oil-cooled boxer engine, which again, like I mentioned, it hits a little bit closer to home because that was actually my first GS. I had it 2008 with that engine. So as soon as I start the R12 GS, it brought me back to those feelings, right? Having that engine to me, it makes a lot of sense to the whole package. And again, I will go into more detail. So we have that 1170cc engine, 109 horsepower and 115 Newton meters of torque, which again, very key to this bike, right? Because it definitely feels very, very torquey. It's not a super light bike at 229 kilos, right? A little bit lighter, of course, than the GS, but definitely not as light as you would like on a kind of off-road type of bike, right? But again, I think for the purpose, it's okay. Then besides obviously the gorgeous design, right? I love how the bike looks, especially on the white theme. You do get a pretty capable off-road suspension, right? With Marzocchi forks and rear suspension with a 210 millimeters travel suspension at the front and 200 millimeters of travel at the back. The suspension is fully adjustable both front and back for preload, rebound, and compression, but it's all manual adjustment, right? So there's no ESA on the bike. You cannot spec ESA on the bike or DSA, whatever the model is. So it is fully adjustable, but you do have to adjust it with the different knobs, right? Both at the front and the back. Then there's two things to call out and have in mind. The first one being the fuel tank. It's actually relatively small at only 15 liters, which actually makes a little bit more sense if you think about it, that the bike was designed to do a bit more off-road, right? So that's less weight on top of the bike and just keeping the weight pretty low. But it will, of course, affect the range, right? Because it is a 1200cc engine at the end of the day, right? With quite a bit of power. So I would imagine that those 15 liters, right, they will not go as far as any other bike. For reference, any other 1200 GS or 1250s have a 20-liter tank, and on the 1300 has a 19-liter tank, right? A little bit smaller, but again, the bike is more efficient, so I guess those two cancel out. So with a 15-liter tank, definitely something to have in mind. Then the other thing, and for shorties for me, it's something to definitely be aware of, is that the seat height is pretty high actually. It measures 860 millimeters, and I was on a very limited tiptoeing situation, right? I can still ride the bike, I can still stop at lights and everything, and again, I'm used to GSs, so my whole control over the feet and everything, it's have that on point. But still, whenever we stop at a light, or whenever we came back to park the bike, I did have to be mindful of, hey, the ground might not be there, right? So be careful with that. For reference, the GS comes at standard at 850 millimeters, but if you have the adaptive ride height, you can lower it down in the low mode, right, to 820. So obviously, almost 40 millimeters of difference. That's quite huge, right, for shorties like myself. Again, still rideable in my case, but you do have to, in some situations, kind of do the scoot your butt to one side or the other. So if you're a shorty, make sure that you have that in mind when you're looking at the R12 GS. So very quickly, what's a demo day and how does it work? It was definitely a first for me, so it was good to know how it actually works. In the past, I've taken obviously bikes for test rides, but a demo day is a little bit different. So you get there, you register, you present your driver's license for obvious reasons, and then you do get a little bit of briefing chat with the guides, right? So in this case, we had 3 guides in our group, and the guides will obviously tell you a little bit about the route that you're going to take. In this case was a little bit of country roads, some twisties, and then going back on the motorway. So you can actually get a feel on the bike on the 3 most common type of road conditions and everything, right? Obviously, with any group ride, you are kind of limited to whatever the rest of the group capabilities are. And in our case, we did have a little bit of a rainy day going on, right? So if some riders are not comfortable with the rain, right, or they ride a little bit slow, then that means that you are stuck a little bit behind them. Easy enough to let them go a little bit and then go after, right, and try to get a little bit of a feel of the bike. Now with the guys, it was very well organized. You had 1 at the front, 1 in the middle, and 1 at the very back of the pack. So basically controlling the whole group. Sometimes they will go out on roundabouts, stop traffic, right? Let the whole group go by, so we don't get the organizing, whatever it is, right? But obviously something that they make very clear is that regular routes of the road apply, right? So stop signs, speed limits, all are gonna adjust, right? You're riding on the road basically right now, so you have to respect all those rules. So with that in mind, they give you the key, jump on the bike, and then you have to get comfortable, of course, with the bike. Make sure that you adjust the mirrors, your controls, the levers, right? That you reach the clutch and the brake just fine. And then you get yourself prepared. So they give you about 10-15 minutes to, between the debrief, getting comfortable on the bike. Once everybody's ready, off you go. So for me, the first impression, like I mentioned, turning that engine on and listening to the old design of the Boxer engine, for me, it was, it definitely hit a little bit on my heart, right? Because that feeling, that noise, right, of turning on my old GS, right, that style of engine holds a very specific place in my heart. After that, of course, you start riding, be a little bit careful at the beginning, right? Like I mentioned, very tall seat and everything, but once you get going, very comfortable actually. It's a very relaxed and natural position. All the controls are where it's supposed to be. The bike doesn't feel small, although it looks a little bit small, right? But no, it's pretty much kind of similar sitting position as the GS. Obviously, you do tell that it is a bike that is designed for off-road, right? The tall seat with the GSs, you kind of sit in the bike, but this one is more on top of the bike. But the controls very similar, all the switch gear and everything exactly the same. BMW quality that you will expect with the buttons and everything in the layout. Very familiar. If you're used to any other Beamers, they will be exactly the same. Doesn't matter if it is GS or XR, right? The controls, I jump in and I knew exactly where everything was. One of the things that caught my attention, and I thought it was kind of the demo bike being a little bit cheeky, that I only had kind of rain, road, and enduro for riding modes. Sometimes when you take a bike out for a spin, they will kind of eliminate the dynamic mode, so you don't have access to the full power and everything. But no, in this case, the R12 GS, it's prepared like that because obviously it's a road bike with off-road capability. So it's not designed to be like a canyon carver or anything like that. It's more designed towards the off-road side of things, right? So those are the 3 riding modes that you had available. Like I said, rain, road, and enduro. Once you get going, it's a very familiar feeling, right, about how the bike rides, the power. Is a very torquey engine, so that is the beauty about that bike. Give it any type of throttle and the bike will just go, right? And the engine has that type of kind of tractor-like feeling, right? Where, now these days the GS has gotten a lot more refined. While the bike is not super light on paper, once you get going, like any good Boxer engine where the weight is very low, it does feel very nimble, very agile going through corners and everything. And even on traffic doing overtakes, due to that torque that the bike has, 115 Newton meters, the bike just picks up and goes, right? And again, because of that kind of more agricultural type of engine, right? It makes you feel like it actually is going a lot faster than it actually is, right? The whole thing kind of shakes a little bit and everything and just goes. It's just fantastic, right? It's a more visual feeling, right? with these bikes, I always say the same thing, right? I do have to be checking on my gauges a lot of the time because the thing will just go too fast and you don't even realize that you're going that fast, right? It's so much smoother that is a completely different feeling. Now, in terms of brake, they felt very strong, right? You have dual disc Brembo brakes at the front, Brembo brakes at the back, right? The only thing for me there is that being a spoiled telelever baby, right, with the GSs, is that obviously this has a conventional fork suspension, right? So when you brake, you do nosedive a little bit, right? And again, that is just me being used to, the GSs and the telelever suspension, where this bike will do exactly the same thing, right? It nosedives a little bit until it settles on the suspension, and then off you go braking, right? So it did take me a few times to get used to the kind of feeling sensation of the front sinking in a little bit, but after that, it was all good. Very strong brakes, right? I did do a few kind of acceleration and stopping, right? Just to get a feeling of the bike, and it felt absolutely adequate, right? For the roads. Going through the corners on country roads, I wasn't able, obviously, to go in neither too fast or kind of lean too hard or anything like that. We were kind of taking it easy as a group ride and everything. But again, I got the feeling that the bike, although, like I said, it's a kind of on the upper side of the middleweight category, the bike still feels, sporty enough. You can definitely chuck it into corners, no problem whatsoever, even with the 21-inch wheel right at the front, which I thought it could be a big difference, right, from the classical 19s on the GS, but no, that made absolutely no difference. So it definitely handles very well on the roads. Now, like I mentioned, on the way back, we went through the highway, right, and we got up to 120 kilometers an hour. And I thought that was when the bike that is more off-road oriented, right, it was going to get me into a bit more trouble, but no, not at all. Obviously, it has no fairings, no wind protection or anything like that, but I could definitely feel the wind on my chest, riding and everything, but there was no buffeting. I wasn't shaking all over the place and everything. The bike felt super stable at, motorway speeds and everything. So I was actually quite impressed on that because I thought I was going to be very shaky, right, and going all over the place. And I'm telling you for experience because I did have kind of road bikes before, right, especially naked bikes like the MT-09, where going at higher speed, I definitely had to kind of crouch down, right, and try to avoid the wind as much as possible. Otherwise, the wind would be, blowing me away all over the place. Of course, I'm not a tall guy, so have that in mind, right? Your mileage might vary, right, depending on your height and everything. This was also a windy day, so I thought it was going to be even worse, but no, not at all. I actually felt that the bike was, relatively comfortable to do highway speeds. It might not be the most comfortable bike for touring, for example, right? But it's absolutely capable of doing it. And again, I was quite surprised about, how it managed the wind. Now, of course, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is only meant to be a kind of first impressions about the bike, how it felt and everything, right? Kind of seeing what the whole thing was about. Besides being as gorgeous as the bike is, right? Getting a feel of the bike and see what the whole thing is capable of. Now, I know that, a little bit of the point of the bike is to be able to take it off-road. And obviously, I didn't do any of that because, again, it was a group ride and everything, right? Maybe, hopefully, someday I'll have that opportunity to take the bike a little bit off the beaten path. But you also have to understand that this bike is not meant for hardcore off-road, right? I think it's more for kind of green laning, dirt roads, gravel roads, that type of stuff, right? Where you can go out, enjoy a few paths and everything and have fun. Can you take the bike and do more hardcore off-road riding? On the right capable hands, yeah, most likely you can. But I don't think that bike was designed for that type of off-road. Now, after these first impressions, right, which is most likely what you will be able to do if you go to a BMW dealer and take an R12 GS for a spin, right? You will be able to ride for a couple hours maybe, right? What do I think about the bike? Would I buy one? If I had the money, 100%. Not only for the looks, right, which I think is dead gorgeous, and I do love that homage to the original R80 GS. I think it's a very comfortable bike, very fun to drive, and I would love to see how it actually performs on the type of off-road that I do, right? Having that ability to have a little bit of a smaller bike, a little bit of a lighter bike, right? But again, having that extra suspension travel and extra capabilities, right, that I'm a little bit limited on a GS. Price-wise, yes, it is a little bit on the higher side compared to other bikes, but you do get that BMW quality, right, that they're known for, right? the same type of quality that you'll get on an XR, GS, whatever it is, right? That quality that BMW offers, which to me, obviously, I'm clearly very biased, but you do get that premium quality, right, out of any BMW motorcycle. And again, going back to that engine, right, that sweet little air and oil-cooled engine, right? I do love that type of grunt that it has, how it actually feels a bit more mechanical, right, if you will, right? That is the kind of feeling that you get out of the R12 GS, and it's a completely different experience to what you get out of a modern GS like the 1300. So in conclusion, dead gorgeous bike, one of the most beautiful products that they made, fun to drive, feels light and nimble out on the road, and for what I've seen on folks that are very capable of road, it definitely holds its own, right? Now, if you're interested on R12 GS, definitely check the bike configurator. There's quite a few options to select from. The price will change and vary depending on which options do you select, right? There's a few things, for example, the gauges, you can go for an analog one, which looks very close to what the R9T has. The one that I took for a ride, it had that little smaller TFT, which I thought it was pretty nice, pretty good. But, you know, having the retro styling and everything, if I was me, I would probably choose the analog dial, right? I think it suits the bike a little bit more. And again, you do have, of course, enduro packages and all that kind of jazz. You can choose from a 17 or an 18 rear wheel, right? Obviously, the 18 being a little bit more capable of road. So yeah, definitely check on the bike configurator to see what are the best options for you and on how to set it up and get the correct pricing on the bike. So there you have it, folks. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you folks on the next one. Thanks.